perspective presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello, folks. Welcome again to our show. I'm Harry Greenberger, the host for the show. We have a very interesting guest today. Cari Roy and I have been meeting and socializing for months at the roundtable luncheons, and trying to get a date on which she could appear on our show. And so month after month it didn't work out, but we finally made it, and Cari Roy is here. Cari Roy is a professional psychic. She also, in addition to her background as a psychic, she has a science background. We're going to talk about both of those things, but just so that you folks will know something more about her, this is what I get, from your website, which is quite impressive.
Thank you.
She has appeared in A&E's Haunted Houses, Tortured Souls and Restless Spirits, the Travel Channel's America's Most Terrifying Places, award-winning ISPR's New Orleans Rich and Haunted, in an episode on the Today Show with travel correspondent Peter Greenberg and celebrity parapsychologist Dr. Larry Montz, and in Creative Health and Spirit Films, The Many Faces of Psychic Ability. Cari has also appeared on local and national radio and news shows, has been referenced in books about local culture, and is in much demand for conventions and special events. In early 2012, she was a featured speaker aboard the annual Holland American World Cruise, and most recently named New Orleans' most renowned psychic and New Orleans' best psychic to see by the Travel Channel. So that lets you know that Cari just didn't pop in here from nowhere. So tell us first about your background in becoming a professional psychic.
Okay. I was very fortunate to have been born into a family of open-minded types. My father was an opera singer. My mother was an opera singer who retired once my father's career became the more prominent. And she pursued what had been her greatest interest, and that is spiritualism. And so she was a medium. Primarily. She also did psychic things, but she was a medium and she would communicate with the departed. And so I was raised doing seances and learning how to read crystal balls and tea leaves. And
all of this as a very young girl.
Yes. Okay. Around the age of 7 is when I started demonstrating abilities. I would just know things were going to happen. I saw things that weren't physically there, weren't physically present. And I would describe them with great detail, enough so that the family members that were around me understood that there was something going on there. And they, at that point, started working with me a little bit more to develop that.
So are you suggesting that this is an inherited ability?
I don't know whether it is, nature, nurture is in the debate of psychic phenomenon too. I personally believe that everybody is intuitive. I believe that this is just something that comes with being a human being. But if you're born into an environment that doesn't believe that, then it's going to be shut down. It's not going to be kind of tended to and encouraged. I was born into the perfect place for somebody who had that, and so when I started developing it, it was shepherded along.
We're talking about your family and that your mother, who was a medium.
Yes.
And now your grandfather also was involved
astrologer,
in this.
Numerologist, inventor, engineer. My belief is that there are parts of the brain where inspiration lives, and I think that the same part of my brain that I use for my work in psychic phenomenon is the same thing that a scientist uses, the same thing as an artist uses, the same thing that inventors use. It's just a place of discovery.
And so at what point did you become a practicing psychic?
I started at about 20 years old. I was pretty young with that. It started because I was at university, and you need to have a gig, right, to put yourself through university. And it was a skill that I knew. I personally was going to start as a vocalist. I was a singer and following more in my father's footsteps. And things just really occurred that made me see that as a psychic, I could really do better for the world. That was how I felt, and it seemed to be the easiest path. People were very interested in it. When people found out that I could kind of tell them what was coming up in the future, I got a lot of response from that.
You say you were at the university. What were you studying?
Temple University. I concentrated primarily in humanities. I studied comparative religion. I studied psychology. It was a very well-rounded, back then they would just consider it liberal arts, but my particular concentrations were cultural anthropology, theology, humanities.
I see. And you stayed for your bachelor's degree?
Yes, Temple University.
Did you go beyond that?
No, I did not. I didn't. When I left, I traveled and decided that I wanted to kind of see more of the world and experience people. And so if I was going to help people, I needed to get to know people.
Okay, well, tell us something about your travels and how you came to. I mean, this is your profession. This is your livelihood.
Yes, it is.
How did you move into that?
Well, I traveled a lot with my father. He was a lead basso for New York City Opera Company, and so we traveled all over the world for that. A lot in Europe, as you would imagine, all over the U.S. And I feel that what that did for me is it really let me get comfortable with all types of people, all types of places. So I could feel open and connected to people, all nationalities, all ethnicities, all educational levels, class levels, everything, just by traveling so much. I think that's one of the benefits for travel for everybody. When I left university, I, at the time, was very interested in Arthurian legend, and so I went off to England and I studied Arthurian. I was looking for the historical Arthur as opposed to the medieval Arthur. I went back to the early 400 time period, and I went to various places where they were identifying it through archaeology that is where the original Arthur was. And so I just found that time period where people consulted. I mean, you have the character of Merlin, who Arthur consulted. There was a time where people consulted kings, consulted people like me. There's the Oracle of Delphi. There was a time where we were very well respected and we weren't just kind of put back in the alley. And
you were looking at the historic information about Merlin and
yes, what we could find, which is like most myth, is that it's based on a person, maybe 10 people, and they kind of blend it together and it becomes this mythic character. And so I was just really, again, looking at this dynamic of people in power and people in respect consulting people like me, and that was standard practice.
Okay.
And so that is what part of my travels were. There, I figured that, okay, let's put the pedal to the metal now. And I felt that at that point, I had learned enough that I felt comfortable bringing this and turning this into a profession.
And so at what point did you come to New Orleans?
I grew up between here and New York. My grandfather was one of the builders of the Stennis Center. He was in the NASA division of GE. And so we spent a lot of time down here. I have a lot of family. My last name is Roy. It's, you know, all over this town and this area. So I've had a lot of family here. And my father also would come and sing with the opera company here. And so we spent a lot of time. I came here full-time in the I would say 1990, late 80s, 1990 is when I came here full-time. And it really is perhaps the most accepting place to do what it is that I do.
All right, now let's talk about what you do. What is a psychic reading?
Okay, a psychic reading is, I like to term myself a forecaster. People will come to me with questions about, I call them the big five. Usually it's romance, finance, career, health, family. These are areas that people feel uncertain about. There may be a pressing issue, you know, am I going to get this job? On a sweeter, it might be, am I going to marry this man? Nowadays, it could be, am I going to lose my house? I mean, it's not all frivolity. There are a lot of heavy things that I deal with. And they'll come to me with questions about the uncertainties. I don't ask them for the details. I simply hold their hands, I concentrate, and I connect with what their potentialities are. And I look at the dynamics of relationships that they have with people. I try to inform them so that they can, you know, if you know what someone's motivation is, you have a better opportunity of having a fruitful relationship with them.
So when they come to you with some questions, you have questions that you ask them, is that correct?
Not a lot. I try not to. Well, the one thing about psychics is that we do frame things in questions. People comment on that when skeptics are going, well, you're asking questions. It's not really that we're asking questions, it's that I am getting the information. It's not about my life. And so I am saying, this is what I'm getting. Does this make sense to you?
And when you say you're getting it, meaning not from what they say or do, but from some other source.
Yes, yes. And what that source is, I have a lot of theories. But there is one thing that psychics get accused about quite a lot, and that is cold reading. And what that is just a heightened ability to read nonverbal communications. In the psychic camp, people are going, oh, no, I don't do cold readings. I've actually had psychics that I've watched, you know, on television who say, I don't know what cold reading is. And I'm thinking, wow, that's, you know, study your subject matter a little, because cold reading is something that we're accused of a lot. And I believe that psychics do cold read, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't feel that that's it, and I don't feel that that's the end of it. I think that that's part of it, and to say that we don't, we then really alienate the skeptic crowd who says, of course you are, you know, that's what you're doing. And so the more that psychics deny it, the more it just polarizes skeptic and believer. I think that we do use that a little bit. I think that may be the key that opens a door. Once I get in that door, the information that I'm getting is very, very specific. I'm not getting stuff that could be cold read by just general responses of somebody. I can find out, you know, sounds of people's names, dates when things that are going to happen. I describe people that I've never seen before. I talk about locations that I've never been to. There is something that happens once that door is open that I am getting stuff that really can't be just explained by cold reading or, you know, fishing. And I really am not fishing for information when I'm doing a reading. I prefer that they not tell me a lot of stuff.
All right. Now, on your website, and it said, you know, what frequently asked questions. And I just asked you, what is a psychic reading? But you said, you also say, what is a pure psychic reading and what is a medium reading? What's the difference in there?
Okay, there are people who call themselves psychics, but really what they're doing is that they're doing tarot cards. You know, they're taking tarot cards and they're doing tarot card readings, or they might be doing palm readings, and they're using a device in order to kind of buffer they're saying that they're getting the information from that. I feel like it's just a buffer that they have between the other person. I am very well versed in all of those. I've studied every form of divination that you can because it's my business to do. But I don't use those. I sit with people, I hold their hands. I don't look at their hands, I just hold their hands. There's something that, for me, that act of connection opens up the door for me to go in and get information. Medium readings, and this is where it gets tricky with the secular humanist group, is that medium readings are connecting with the departed, which implies an afterlife.
Of course, yes.
And this is, I have a lot of questions about that. My personal, I'm very open, and we'll talk a little bit about the science side, but
yes.
I'm open to inquiry, and I don't really grab onto one answer. I feel that there are many answers, and more are being revealed every day about what the afterlife is. I do not believe that it is the same as here, except it's puffy clouds and draped curtains and everybody walks around in a toga, as is often the way that it's interpreted on television and other people. Once you leave this plane, it doesn't seem to make sense to me that you would want to, you know, re-simulate this, the body. You know, no matter, then, you know, it becomes a different, the rules become different when you don't have form.
Right.
And so, but I do believe that there is something that lingers. I do believe it could be that consciousness lingers. And I believe that I can contact that. I believe that I can contact it because I have such a track record of being able to communicate with people that I don't know, that I don't see, that I have no way of knowing, who are no longer here in form. And so as a medium, I do contact that. And I try to relay some kind of message, some communication to someone who is in grief because they've lost that person and they would like the fact that they're still present, that they're okay. They would like that validated. So.
Now, you are correct that we secular people are skeptical about much of what you do. But in order to be good skeptics, we need to know what it is
that we do, yes.
Which is why we're talking today.
Yes.
And you know, when it comes to the afterlife, which we say doesn't exist, because our position is that you know, when you're dead, that's it. Religious people would say, when your body dies, your soul lives on. Now, is it a soul? Is that what you're able to make contact with?
The soul, consciousness, I mean, it may be consciousness, and we just use the term soul. You know, in the scientific community, it would be consciousness. There's a gentleman, Dr. Mario Beauregard, who has written several books. Brain Wars is the most recent one, about his studies of afterlife, of consciousness existing after physical death. And so he's not really referring to it as a soul. He's referring to it as consciousness. Okay. There are consciousness organizations that are trying. The University of Tucson does a conference every year, wonderful conference, that brings a host of different people. Deepak Chopra, you know, Chambers, who is the big in consciousness studies. They all get together, and we're all trying to figure this out. Soul is I like soul. I like the feel of the term soul. It maybe because it feels like it's more here and consciousness is here, and it is the feeling versus intellect. But I guess, yes, I guess soul, for lack of a better term, is Personality. Okay. Personality isn't a bad term either. That I, Cari, or you, Harry, when we are no longer here, there is an element of the personality of Cari that lives on, and not just in writing and not just in video. And
when you say lives on, you mean forever?
That's another big question. Forever, yes, I would say forever, but
that's a long time.
That's a long time, but you know, the one thing that we have been playing around with a lot is does time really exist, or is time just something that we need here in order to get the job done and to have this experience? So if time doesn't exist, then forever is a relative term, you know?
Well, when you're talking about the existence of time,
yes,
we are now getting around to your other background, which you would like to talk about, and that is your science background.
Yes.
Tell us about that. Okay,
this is very interesting. One half of my family are artists, spiritualists, poets. They operate in that world. The other half of my family are scientists, and I was raised a good deal of time in a lab of my uncle, who was a contemporary of Einstein. He was a well-known zoologist, and I spent a lot of time in his lab as a kid. His wife, my aunt, my mother's sister, actually raised me a good deal of my life because my mother was killed when I was a teenager, and she became a mother figure to me. Very, very, very much a scientist. And what my mother had taught me with the training of crystal balls and seances and tarot cards and dream interpretation and past life ideas, when she passed and her sister, my aunt, stepped in and took over, she started giving me the Skeptical Inquirer journal. She signed me up for my subscription to that, and I would read that every month.
So you've had that kind of exposure.
Oh, totally. James Randi, and I actually agree with a lot of what it is that they're saying. I'm not 100% in this camp of, you know, everything is this woo-woo magic that's going on over here, and that science somehow does a disservice to us. I don't think that we do a disservice to science. I don't think science does a disservice to us. And I think we're really all trying to work towards figuring this out. And there are things that, just the idea of in quantum mechanics, particle physics, the entanglement is really explaining some of what it is that happens with psychic phenomenon. Is that, you know, you have two particles who together, they're together, and they somehow have what is called an entanglement. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, and I love that term because it sounds like you could just.
All right, now what does this action of particles have
to do with psychic phenomenon?
Yes.
Okay. When these two particles entangle, they can go off and be in totally different places. And what happens to one happens to the other without them having to be in its non-locality. They don't have to be in the same area, in the same location. Mm-hmm. And so that is something that explains a little bit how it is that you and I might come into an entanglement, and I might know what's going on with you at a distance, even though I'm not near you. Or you might know what's going on with me at a distance, not knowing what's going on. You know,
you're saying that all of us may have that capacity.
I think we do.
But it isn't developed as it is with you.
Yeah. But yes, that's a simplistic. I mean, there's a lot more complications that go along with it. But that's something of a discovery that makes sense in the psychic phenomenon. There's another thing. Recently, a gentleman, a doctor at UCLA, discovered something called the psychic cell. And
psychic cell.
The psychic cell. And here is where there's a lot of stuff that happens when people come to me, and I do get skeptics, is that, you know, they're asking me to prove that psychic phenomenon is real. And I'm like, well, you know, there's a lot of science that's going on right now that is working on this and has been working on this for a long time. And so the idea that this is just some kind of a fringe, belief over here that just goes on in tea rooms and back alleys or people sitting on the square, and that there is no scrutiny that happens here is really wrong. I mean, there's a lot of work that's been going on. There is, again, I'd mentioned University of Arizona at Tucson. I mean, these are heavy scientists that are studying this stuff. There's the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California, founded by Edgar Mitchell, a gentleman, Dean Radin, PhD Dean Radin, does an immense amount of research on this.
And what are they finding?
That there are, that these occurrences are being upheld by science, that they're not just ideas, that there are people do have the ability to predict the future. I'm sure you're familiar with the Zerner cards, little tests that they came up, and that was actually developed at Duke University, had the Rhine Institute, which was connected to it, which was completely devoted to psychic research. And those Zener cards in the tests where somebody would have a little wavy card or a little circle or a little star, and one person would hold it up, what are you thinking? And the other person would give them the symbol. Actually, the test results are pretty high on that. What happens, though, is I think that the scientific community is a little selective in what it is that they are pushing, and they're not really pushing the fact that there is a high accuracy rate.
Well, what they were testing was clairvoyance and telepathy.
Yes.
And which you're saying has been validated.
Well, there has been, and you just don't hear a lot about it. There's the Society of Psychical Research. It is an organization where if you go on the internet and you look at that, and you have to be a high-level academic PhD to be included as a member of it. I'm not a member of it because I'm not an academic PhD. I'm not a PhD in academia presently. That's really what you have to be in order to belong to that foundation. That's not a bunch of people sitting on the square,
Okay.
So, yeah.
We've got about a minute to go.
Sure.
I'm going to let you tell our audience anything you would like to tell them.
Well, I feel that we all benefit by asking questions. I'm not afraid of skeptical. I think it's good to have healthy skepticism. I really do, in everything. I also believe that it is important to have an open mind. And the thing that I really appreciate with you asking me here is that here we are, maybe on opposite sides of the spectrum, and we all have an interest in what each other believes.
Yes.
And I think that is the best thing that anybody could bring to coming to see me for a reading. Bring healthy skepticism, bring an open mind, and find out for yourself.
Cari, our time is up. Thank you. Thank you, folks, for watching our show. We hope we will see you again next week.